This is the last principle. Good governance help establish a stronger, more efficient, sustainable, and respectable NGO sector, right? I think we all agree with that. So the trouble is, if one NGO has a problem, it reflects on all of us, and that's not good. So, okay, now let's go to the recommendations. General governance recommendation. What I'd like to do is run through these quickly and then come back and then open, and you'll see one of them is about this procedural. Professional management practices should be established to ensure a long-term and sustainable operation of the foundation. Sorry? Certified, okay, yeah, we haven't forgotten that. Next, specific governance recommendation. Foundations and founders should declare and communicate clearly and credibly their purpose, objective, and results and impact. I think we heard that today. Board of Trustees should be committed and aware of their duties and responsibilities and should have the right composition and diversity. Maybe we want to add staggered boards. In other words, limited time limits. Roles and responsibility of foundation board members and managers should be clearly defined and segregated. This is a draft, guys. We're here to talk to you about this and get your thoughts. Financial accounting, after this I'm going to give it to you. Financial accounting and recommendations. Pricewaterhouse and process, especially. Every foundation, if they can, should have an audit performed by an independent auditor. We heard that today.
NGO should protect them.
Okay, hold that thought. Government should reintroduce requirement for an audit for any foundation with over 100 million in revenue. It used to exist, it doesn't exist anymore. Tax incentives should benefit service providers, perhaps auditors. Excuse me, let me do this one. Encourage individual, private, and corporate giving. There used to be, as we heard, the tax deductibility for individual donations. It doesn't exist at all today. It's crazy. It's just crazy. There are many academic studies that show that if the private sector helps do something as a cause that the government might otherwise do, it's 10 times leverage because the private sector can engage and NGOs can engage those capacity. Also, refine the tax deductibility of corporates. Tax benefits on donations, this goes back to one of the principles, should be no worse than for foundations that are performing subcontracting activities for the government, for example.
Okay, so now I'm in a fortunate role to talk about a less interesting but still very important part. So, procedure recommendations. As we have talked about, these are a real pain. What we believe is that if we set foundations on an equal level with corporations, or the corporate sector in general, especially liability-wise, when we're talking about liability of board members, then we should give them the same legal certainty which corporations have. So on one side, we looked at obstacles to start foundations, and we found that the incorporation and changes to the field foundation is really too long, and this has a very serious effect on legal certainty. Giving you an example, a board member leaves, and the leaving board member and the new board member stepping in its place, the registration takes 8, 9, 10 months in average. And if it takes this long, then maybe the board will not be able to make decisions, will not have a signatory in the meantime. So these are really things which should go faster. So we thought that we have a very good example of how this problem could be solved, and this is has actually been implemented in the corporate sector for quite a while now, and this is standard forms. As I have already mentioned in the panel discussion, this possibility has always been there in the Hungarian procedural law for civil associations and foundations, but the forms have actually not been introduced. It is very interesting. At the beginning of each year, we saw the deadline slipping. There has been a deadline in the Procedural Act for 5 years or 3 years. It has been adopted in 2011. In 2011, it said it would be introduced in 2012. In 2012 they changed it to 30, now it's July 1st in 2015, which, considering the not too complex task question here, I think it should have been possible up to today to introduce these forms. So we think that these should be introduced. Our second recommendation here is to establish concrete deadlines for the court, which, if not maintained, result in automatic registration. This may seem to be a far-fetched, but this is actually the case in the case of corporations as well. When looking at the system, we didn't want to be unrealistic in our recommendations. So we thought, what is the compromise between the system for corporations and the one to be introduced based on our recommendations? And we believe that if the system was introduced this way, so automatic registration, if the deadline is not kept, then it will still be subject to appeal by the public prosecution. It is today as well, so even if you get a change registered after 9 months, it still happens that the public prosecution will appeal the decision. So there will still remain a fallback option to avoid registration of unlawful changes, but we think that the courts should be forced to at least try to maintain the deadlines which are set to them by law. Because currently there is a 60 days deadline, but there is not a single court in Hungary which keeps it. And I think I'm handing back.
Okay, so full and honest disclosure, just to finish, we have 2 more pages here. Building credibility in the NGO sector, that's what it's about. First is donor community, right? This is what we heard today. Please, we need more communication and standards. Create mechanism to establish a system or whatever, charity navigator type. We heard about that. Maybe social media, collaborative economy. I don't know. Let's figure it out. NGOs should adopt the code of ethics. We heard NEO has a code of ethics. Great. Maybe we should even promote that one. I don't know. Let's talk about it. And the board of trustees and managers should sign that document. Not only the donors, but the responsible people, right? Being accountable. Education and training we heard about. Great. Develop and provide NGO professional management focused on education, training, and higher education. Well, I think one of the things I would suggest here is also AmCham can act as a platform with others to help promote best practice and train those who don't understand the social enterprise, entrepreneurship, impact investing differences, right? In, greed or profit or whatever. Anyway, let's reconcile all that. Provide soft skills, again, and government officials, as the thought was, anybody providing oversight should have this certification charge.
Yes, sir.
There we go. Good. So, issues to discuss. Let's have an interactive 10 minutes or so or more. Continue with sandwiches, whatever. If you have ideas now, great, tell us. If you have ideas tonight, tomorrow morning, next week, next month, join us. And let's figure this out to really make an impact and to make Hungary an even better place, like my son envisions. Now, you got the floor. Good.
So, thank you.
So I'm taking notes.
So I believe that the classical Roman law type of approach, that there is a government sector and there is a private sector, that's the 2 pillars of society and because this again will highlight that if we have a problem with the regulation of non-profits, we want equal regulation with corporations, and that's again this approach with the 2-pillar approach would be a good way. Again, when we are looking for funding and finding the right resources for our non-profits, for our projects, again we feel that only focus on non-profits is not enough, because just look at the United States, for example. 75% of all private giving is It's not the Warren Buffett or not Bill Gates and not the secular foundation, but 75% is religious giving. So if you want to do like philanthropic work, you really need to include everything what the private sector has. So again, so it's really a deep and really philosophical question, but I think we should rethink with this mentality.
So sorry, what is your recommendation?
Yeah. So with the for this, I can give you like a detailed feedback concerning this.
Well, okay, I don't mean to make this into a kind of a, but so you're saying that two of the sectors are more important, or that's Roman law, etc. But what would you like to see happen?
So I think the panel discussion also highlighted that there are not too big differences between for-profits or non-profits. So we should really...
So you think private sector and NGO sector are one and the same?
Yes, I work now for non-profits in the last 8 years, but I do not see like different like human motivation between for-profit, like especially the workers or like every employees of these organizations. They want the same. So I don't think that it's really a myth of a third sector. So I do not, and of course that I think there's a huge mistake that we miss out, like the oldest social innovation entities, like churches, like and that was the first like presentation that social innovation started like 30 years ago or something. Or no, it's really not the case. I mean, we really miss like the organizations or institutions who are like thousands of years old. And all right, just it's really
okay. So let's. I think NGOs might include religious. It might include sporting associations. It might include women's rights. It might include democracy advocates. It might include I don't know, robo rights. It might include cancer kids, health. So well, what does everybody else think? Is it?
Well, I think he makes a point. Yeah, that's what I think.
I think that I could add to what you were saying, because actually that's the problem. Most of the money usually doesn't come from the big corporation or the richest, but it's actually the community that gets involved, and that's why maybe a recommendation could be that the population, general population, would get more understanding or maybe more accessibility of what NGOs actually in Hungary are doing. So, maybe you can have fairs or find a way, effective way how to introduce what kind of NGOs there are in Hungary, what they are doing, how people can get involved in general. Because what I saw, for example, before the tax season, I saw the posters, okay, donate 1% because we are doing this or that, but otherwise maybe be more included in everyday life of general population.
And Anna Maria, I want to also.
Yeah, thank you. The way I understood your point was that it is not sufficient to focus regulation on the NGO sector, only since its effectiveness, as we could well see from the discussions, depends on a range of intersecting issues. And also we looked at those pillars, but today we know that today in the new public administration paradigm, for instance, you have lots of intersecting cooperations, business with government and private and NGOs. So I think that the way I see what you said and what you said, that first of all, it's also a communication issue, which can be included into the recommendations to make sure that all those changes are well communicated, and all those affected know about those changes. And I think that the second step to improve the effectiveness of the NGO sector is to improve the relevant aspects of both businesses and government. Because I think it was very, very clear that an NGO sector, the effectiveness of an NGO sector is also dependent on the transparency and accountability perception of businesses. So I think that one has to sit down and see what is the broader context of NGO effectiveness and touch upon all the relevant stakeholders to make this work. Have I understood you well?
I was just like
I
talking about the guidelines, so how to implement it. So this guideline,
No, I just wanted to...
But I agree with my own
Did you want to comment?
This time I have a question, and it may be my ignorance, but once these recommendations are finalized, how is going to be used? What is the purpose of this paper? And I'm asking it especially because I fear that the different sets of recommendations target different groups. Some target the NGOs themselves, they ask them to do something, some others target the state, etc., etc. So I'm wondering what is the overall purpose of the whole thing?
It's a very good question, and AmCham, the American Chamber of Commerce, has in the past created these position papers. They are multi-purpose. Some of them regard a specific sector, like outsourced manufacturing, contract manufacturing, electronic. Some are about governance transparency, which we did in 2005. Some are about taxes. So the purpose is to advocate. AmCham, yes, it has members, but it's not advocating change at government levels for the individual member. It's for its community. So the impact that we hope to achieve is an advocacy, it's not a lobbying. So the NGO sector type of recommendations, again, we think that everybody has to do certain things, and it's not just one thing. So we shouldn't just direct the paper at the government. There's a lot of role, we all have a responsibility to do something. That's the idea. Did I answer your question? Or what didn't I answer?
So that, okay, there will be this paper, and then it asks different people nicely what they should do, and who's going to do that?
Yeah, you're okay. Yeah, who's responsible and who's accountable? When managing people, I always kind of say, you're responsible, but if this doesn't happen, you're accountable. See, this will happen if you don't do this. Unfortunately, when you're advocating, you can't say to a regulator, say, if you don't change, I'm going to do something. Maybe there's some tools, like with this social economy, we can use to create certifications, ratings, which people will begin, as Chris was even saying, begin to feel that pressure to want to, and Neil is trying to do as well, and I think everybody's trying to do, is get this peer pressure and also stakeholder pressure. That's the theory. Maybe we're wasting our time, but I don't know. Any other comments? Yes, phone number.
Yeah, so I'm missing a few bullet points from the list, and namely, the private sector. Sector's impact is not only through CSR and trying to look good, and it will comes into their, marketing box, and it's just a tool for them to look better. I think it's really important to. So the thing is that the average age of game-changing global corporations is 15 years or 20 years, something really, really low. That means the most important game-changing global corporations of the next 20 years haven't born yet. And it's really important to incentivize corporations to have to start thinking in their triple bottom line. And it can be done in many ways, but I think it's not only about NGOs. It's also about the private sector, and the private sector needs to get involved, and we need to show the private sector that they can make change if they start to think. If they expand their mindset to not only have profits in mind, but a few other things as well.
Great. So tax incentive is one thing, donor accountability, maybe social tools to create accountability.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly.
Great. Okay. And there was a question here.
What I really miss is social investment, I think, which is good for the NGOs and good for the social aware for-profit organization as well. So if, I think that must be rule for that, how you spend the money. But if you are a chamber of commerce, I think it would be great to somehow to create maybe members of a social investor clubs or something like that. Must be the rules how you spend the money, how you who you want to support, but you can measure the impact. There are a lot of books about that, how you measure the social impact, the environmental impacts. So it's I totally miss here. Like, I'm working for a small NGO, and we hardly have money for the bookkeeper, not for an independent auditor and these kind of things. So it's I agree, but I disagree. That so if you make more complicated the life of an NGO in Hungary, most of them are really small NGOs. It's a lot of really documentation what you brought here.
So you're saying let's not make recommendations that burden and kill NGOs. Let's make recommendations that help NGOs. But if you were 100 million in revenue or donations, could you do an audit? Yeah. Okay. So.
It's a scale question. Hungarian sector is small.
Yeah. Very few over 100 million. I agree. But NEO's effort is to get everybody to sign this code of ethics, get everybody to get together and create this accountability. One of the questions we had, actually, I'm just...
Could you go back, please, so that you can see the recommendation?
Yeah, I'm going back. Where do you want me to go back? And Chris wants to say something.
I actually think that's a great point. And I'd actually turn the question around and ask the young lady what she would suggest that we can do to better support small NGOs. Not just 100 million plus, because I think that's the question. My question is, I think you make an excellent point, because I think about NGOs from the lone entrepreneur up to the 100 million plus, NGO. It's a spectrum. It's a matter of scale. What practical things can this group recommend or actually do to support NGOs like yours and other smaller NGOs?
Like Vera told just 1 hour ago that there is no any other opportunities, like the Norway grant that we can, for example, to apply for a great for support a great program maybe in countryside with marginalized communities. So there is no any funds in Hungary. So if Chamber of Commerce can somehow create a scheme, I don't know, which maybe can be, it could be also corporate membership, or it could be like, I don't know, rich people, or just not rich, I don't know, like yes, funds, yeah. Like a social investment fund, social investment club.
A private social.
Yes, of course.
Yeah. What size do you think that fund would need to be in terms of scale to be meaningful to Hungary? How big a fund?
How big the fund?
To be meaningful.
I think the Norway funds can be really assembled. That there are micro, medium, and larger scale. Just, I don't know, sometimes some million forints is enough for a program to reach thousands of people, to change the mindset. So that's why the NGO sector is much more effective than a corporation. We can reach much more people and to make much more impact.
And do you feel that the larger NGOs in this room, including on some of the panels that we heard today, are not able to do that at the scale that you think is needed? For example, two of the panelists on the third panel, Nest and Ashoka, I mean, they're making investments as individual entrepreneurs and trying to support them.
Well, I don't know if they are here. Ashoka works only one person per year. Nest works with 10 NGOs maximum, 10. So it's not enough. It can have an impact, but it's really small impact. If you see the whole territory of Hungary, and I'm absolutely believing local, small NGOs who is working with unemployed people and with poor people, so social-based community development projects, like there is no money at all.
So it's not enough.
Yeah, even you can measure the impact, so you can decide if it's worth to impact in this. But
you know, I just want to add, I personally believe, this is my opinion, this isn't the opinion of the group, the committee, but I personally believe what's missing in Hungary are community foundations, strong community foundations. What's a community foundation? It's like AmCham has a community foundation, but its community is the members of AmCham. It's very limited. Tomasz Kurowski, who is sitting here, he has established a community foundation in the 9th district. And as he said, the trouble is they have trouble growing because they have their network, and then how do they get bigger? United Way is a community foundation too. It's a little different scale. But how I personally believe that strong community foundations which can support, even on a regular basis, small NGOs that are making an impact and have a professional capacity, in-house, out-house, outsourced, in-house, doesn't matter, that can make the impact broadly and can follow up. And then it's not just some politician in Norway who all of a sudden says, sorry, no more money, and then you're dead. But I do think there's money in Hungary. There's a lot of money in Hungary. It's just not organized. I don't know if you agree with that. So I promise the SOS people, go ahead. Sorry.
I would like to make a recommendation. There is a good idea that we should ask in the recommendation, within the recommendation, some sort of social investment or things like that. If you remember in the presentations before, it was mentioned that approximately 4 people out of 10 give their 1% donation or tax to somebody nominated. But there is 6 people. There is a pot of an amount which I assume is between 1 billion Hungarian forint, which is also part of the 1%, but is not dedicated to any NGO. Why don't we ask the commitment of the government to give that as a fund and to apply for by NGOs? Thank you.
Sorry, I promised here someone had a question. question or a statement, and then over there.
Just very quickly, one of these you said, like, what if, like, you're, as an American Chamber of Commerce, you set up something like the Giving Pledge, something like Bill Gates started and everyone liked it in the morning, like, can you organize something like that for business sector people in Hungary? Because I think that could be a startup money for a community foundation for social investment. And that could, I think, also show a good example to ordinary people for their tax donations, you know, to do that. If people see that, hey, the really rich give their money, their own money, then I think it's a good example. Because we can wait for the government to organize a big marketing communication campaign for people that, hey, you know, there's a ton of money that you don't donate from your taxes, but the government is slow, and the government is the government. So I have a bigger hope in the private sector people.
Great idea. Okay, thank you. So Giving Pledge, great. Next, there was the lady, I'm sorry, and then you in the back. I'm taking notes, by the way.
I'm Eva Deák from Partners Hungary Foundation. I have two comments and actually two recommendations. And one is just, you mentioned that a fund should be established to give to civil organizations. And I believe that what you said, that there is a lot of money in Hungary for charity and for civil organizations. And the role of AmCham in mediating is great. And that's what you showed here, that you can mediate between sectors. And I think as this event here should be duplicated or organized frequently to bring people together. Because as we experienced here, dialogue is extremely important, and dialogue and personal relationships are extremely important in this whole case. That's one thing. And the other thing is that you've started your presentation at the very beginning with the three pillars, with the three sectors. But we miss the government here. And I think that's the point. Nobody is here from the government.
There was a...
Oh, well, it's always like that. We have a lot of issues, a lot of cases when we need the participation, dedication from the government. And I think if the two sectors are here, we should somehow press our government, as we want to believe that we live in a democratic society. So we should press our government to participate in this dialogue. And that's another recommendation, that the two sectors has to press the government to participate in dialogue like this.
So repeat this kind of event and continue the dialogue. Great.
Yeah.
There was one back there as well.
Thank you. Marko Tomic from Central European University. I just have a comment. Like, the first slide that you showed was no subordination, no oversight of the government. And then somehow we just came back to, we need government for this. Like, maybe we need for the legislation and regulation, but somehow we came back to 1% that needs to be given from the taxes, and government needs to, that, like, I feel we said 50,000 NGOs in Hungary, and they're like maybe 100, maybe 1,000 is big enough to be self-sufficient, self-sustainable, and the rest are probably dependent on local governments, municipalities, government, and in that way, just the first idea is somehow for me lost, at least from what I heard here.
I didn't say that they shouldn't work together.
Yeah, but I'm just saying, like, in a way that if you're a local NGO, even here in Budapest, most of the time I believe that the money, like, somehow if you're dependent on the money from the government or the politics, you are more vulnerable to be under the influence of the politics and their interests. I'm not saying it's a case, I'm just saying that then we need to find different ways of financing.
Are we saying the same thing?
Yeah, I agree. I'm just commenting that I heard that people are somehow calling in the government all over again.
Yeah, maybe just one thing we might not be members in token. So when we started preparing this position paper, the aim of the position paper is not to say what each individual member of the workshop can do for the NGO sector. So what you were saying is a great idea, promoting dialogue, helping each other, setting up a fund. But the aim of the position paper is, and the aim of the work of the working group is to locate the problems of the NGO sector and propose solutions to it. It is not what we can do as working group members, but what the society, what we all can do for the NGO sector to help them. And we try to boil down the main issues to 3 or 4 major problems, like lack of sustainability, which stems from underfunding, which stems from lack of transparency. So we try to locate the main problems and try to make recommendations on how to solve, or at least make them smaller. We do not think that what we are saying is a one-fits-all solution. We're saying that these are recommendations which we make on the basis of locating the biggest problems of the sector, to the growth of the sector, and what we believe are what we hope to be the most appropriate solutions that could be realistically achieved. We don't say that these will cure all problems of the sector, but we say that this is what we believe could be the first steps into the right direction.
I want to thank, unfortunately, she's not here right now. Yeah, okay. Well, maybe then I'll see it. So what we want to do, we want to have this event again. I think that's most. And then there was some training ideas too, I think, that came out. Let's have some trainings. Maybe we can all work together to get the right people in the room and work together to train everybody. I'll repeat it when she comes in, but I wanted to thank her for the question, because that she asked, we need to understand who the audience is and what we're doing, and make sure that we can measure our impact of what we want to achieve. And some of the things that are going to go in this paper, we can measure. It's like how many trainings we have, how many people come to the trainings, okay, we feel good as the numbers go up, but it's also about change, and tax change, procedural change, some very specific things. We'll know if it changes. We'll know. Any other comments, please? Suggestions? Charles? And Judith, I'm sorry, you ladies first. She was
It's okay. I just really wanted to make one comment. That basically one of the reasons why we are here is also to attract the attention of academia on this event, because what really is necessary, I think, and that's why we aimed at the universities and the management studies at the universities, was that really train people to be efficient NGO managers, because what we heard here and what you were discussing now, just why dialogue is necessary, because it's really important to have people who think about the sustainability, connections, networking, and how to keep the whole NGO sector alive, and how to really make it efficient and quasi-business-like, and that's what we really can help, I think. So basically what I think the AmCham can really help, and the position paper can also help, is really this training, and I think the emphasis is really on training what we can do at the first place.
Hello, my name is Kari Ukai, or Charles Joke from the Fulbright Commission, and I'd like to speak on behalf of myself, not on behalf of the Commission. I founded a foundation 10 years ago. We don't need this kind of assistance. We have 4 million in revenue, all from private, small, little old ladies contributing 1,000 forints at a time. We don't want to get bigger. We're happy. We report to our constituents. We know who our donors are. We know who our clients are. We're very happy. But I think these recommendations apply to those professional nonprofit organizations, whether they're organized as an association or as a foundation or as a nonprofit, KFT actually, that have a professional staff that's paid, right, and have some kind of tax benefit, public purpose status. Most of those 50,000 NGOs are not thieves, they're not crooks, they're simply the basis of democracy. And they came about in the late 80s and early 90s to solve very local problems. And many of them never want to be formalized. Some of them were forced into formalization in order to get money. And then when they started to get money, they needed to fill out forms and get registered. And you know, you have the civil egyesülés, or all kinds of informal ways or very loose ways in which a small neighborhood association planting trees on the corner, like the gentleman here suggested, they could do that without a formal organization or do it in a very cheap manner. So these recommendations, I think, apply to the professional, full-time nonprofit organizations that have public benefit status and want to keep it that way. And so maybe if we can differentiate the levels of recommendations by type of organization and not pick on those 50,000. I mean, I really like to come down strongly and say most of them are not crooks. Thank you.
Couldn't agree more. Charles, what can we do to support your organization? What can we do to support your organization?
Oh my!
You know, I just want to say foundations, founders, and board members burn out. And well, everybody burns out. But then you have to get the next person involved. Then you have to get the next person involved, and it's a succession issue.
It's not sure.
Maybe for you, I'm just being a devil's advocate now, so maybe for you that's enough. But once you get tired, or whatever, then does the foundation continue? And this is a question of self-sustainability. It is a succession question, just like in business. If you don't have self-sustainability to pass on, then your cause will be short-lived. Maybe. I don't know. So aren't we all working to have things on an ongoing basis? That's not to say these efforts aren't important. Of course they are. God. Anyway, but you would take a better tax deduction for individuals, wouldn't you?
Most of my contributors are retired, so there's no 1% that they don't pay taxes. So.
Would you accept better procedural legal things?
Of course I would.
Good. So I'm glad some of it applies. Good.
It doesn't apply. Most of it does. The audit stuff, forget it.
Okay, the audit stuff, man. No one said everybody has to be audited. Next, any other questions? Yes, please.
Good afternoon, my name is Andrea Kruger, I work for Preslevich, and I'm in the human services field, and I have three very specific recommendations I think this party could do. And I'm not going to elaborate on how I got to these, but I would be happy to do it later if there's any interest. But I think one suggestion came from the second panel, or one idea came during the second panel, and I think we could do something in like mapping the CSR activities of private sector members in this country and publicize it so that it is available and educational for the non-profits and then the general public. What is CSR and how it should be conducted, and then I think it would make visible also the companies who are not doing anything in that field at this point. So that's one thing. The second one, I think we should do some public education and I'm going to say this donor education on the topic of human resources costs and overhead costs that are not evil for non-profits. And the general, I think the general idea about this in Hungary right now is really bad, and it's just, a non-profit cannot generate income, and if they do, they are, right next to the evil. So I think that's another thing that we could do here. And then the third one is to somehow help non-profits, and especially now I'm talking about the more professional NGOs who provide human services in Hungary, to help them measure the social return on investment. Because the field I am working in is, I do work with, I'm going to say this, I work with aggressive kids. And what I do with them now, the impact of that cannot be seen in a year, it can be seen in 15 or 20 years when they are not end up in jail, but actually do some more contribution to society. And there is a fourth thing, but I'm really not going to talk a whole lot about it right now, but the keynote speaker was talking about building better business models. And I think we should start looking into what are the elements of a business model, because I think if we think about non-profits, and if we think about the work that is to be done in Hungary, a business model should include how you change the attitudes, and that's where a lot of us have to start with, and then also how you organize your business, so the management issues that this gentleman was bringing into the conversation earlier. Thank you.
That's great. I just want to say, I wanted to thank Prakash for your suggestion, because we have to know who our audience is. We have to know what we want to do in the next step and how we follow up and measure impact. That's what I was all about. So thank you. That's what we can do. Yes, there's a question.
I'm Adira Michael from the Society Foundation, Cyber Forum Initiative, and we talked here about NGOs' responsibility to be transparent, and also donors that they should be transparent in their grant making, but we didn't talk about donors' responsibility of helping NGOs practice good governance, be transparent and be sustainable. We work in Roma initiatives, and this can be one of the targets of the recommendation. Donors can be one of the targets. In Roma initiatives, we give institutional development support for Roma organization in the regions, where we provide funding not just for overhead costs and for staff, but also costs for having board meetings, audit, or consultancy on developing a strategy, because sometimes the organizations want to do all these things, but they don't have the capacity themselves to do this, and they don't understand the laws so they need legal advice. Sometimes we provide also legal advice. So I think also it's donors' responsibility to provide help to organizations to do this. Because, also good governance in this part of the world is like new. Governance entered our vocabulary 20 years ago. In English, it's 200 years old. So, and yeah, it's not, we need to explain, I think, to our organization. And sometimes it's translated different to different languages. So sometimes it's translated even as management. And then you have an overlap between management and board in organization, or executive board, and they think that it's executive. And it's not just with Roma organizations that have this overlap, but a study a few years ago on Hungary, it was that 60% of organizations have this overlap. And they don't understand that. They think that they are, according to law, they think that they are okay because the laws always speak about the governance and they never mention management and the
Great. Any last comment?
But all of these recommendations and teaching, education, I think one thing how we could have NGOs is to get closer to the sectors. I mean NGOs and private sectors, and let's say governments as well. And I mean workshops like this, but not only conversations during the breaks, but when the sectors can meet together and talk together face to face, like 5 minutes short speeches, and then they could meet, they could talk, they could share opinions. So I think this could be a great help for NGOs to meet the people who really could help, and not only on workshops like this. Do you think that it can happen that a workshop can be organized like this?
What do you guys think? Should we do this again? I didn't hear you.
Yes.
What?
Yes.
All right. Thank you. Good. Yeah, let's do that. And so we had a recommendation for the donor side to be more responsible, transparent, donor education. That's great. Let's continue this. What's a concrete next step? So we are meeting at AmCham every month. I would say you're invited, but everybody in the same room every month is going to be a nightmare. So how do we communicate? I think what we should do is this has been videoed. We'll put it up on YouTube, number one. We'll use this to create minutes of this, of the recommendations of where we should go. Whoever really wants to help, let's get together. Let's plan a next meeting. Maybe we can together help organize it. Better that way. And then, is that good for a start? Great. Thank you very much. I enjoyed it. Thank you, Robbie. Thank you, everybody. Let's have some seminars.